A 37 million rand tender to secure the fence on the border with Zimbabwe will be probed by the Auditor General in South Africa. This follows the repair and extension of the fence at Beitbridge to protect the country from the spread of the coronavirus. Now, the project has already come under attack from smugglers and border jumpers. The matter was discussed during a meeting held by Parliament's Public Works Committee today. Lindsay Dentlinger is following that story. She joins us now live from Cape Town. So what's the status of that fence and why is the tender actually being probed?
Good evening, Shahan. Well, that fence has now been completed. You'll recall that the Minister, Patricia de Lille, made the announcement in Parliament towards the end of March, just before the lockdown, that it was necessary to secure the border with Zimbabwe. Parts of that fence had been removed, had been damaged. But many of the people are criticising, saying, well, is this money well spent? And not everybody is convinced that the kind of fencing that has been used, just a continuation of the existing fence, was a wise idea. You will recall that the fence was extended and fixed 20 kilometres east and west of the border post, and to respond to those critics that has not been money well spent. As we know, people have already cut through the fence, removed parts of it. Patricia de Lille saying she's asked the Auditor General, Kimi Makwetu, to investigate, to check on it. I should point out that the full 37 million rand has not yet been paid. Public Works Department officials telling Parliament that they had sent their officials to check on the work, and that they are still in the process of revising that invoice, determining exactly what needs to be paid. But Patricia de Lille saying it's not her department's responsibility to protect that fence. That is the responsibility of the South African National Defence Force, but that it was necessary to come to some kind of agreement, not only with the government of Zimbabwe, but also other countries with which South Africa shares borders, to ensure that the country's borders are properly protected and to prevent it from coming under attack from those trying to jump the fence.
Now, the Public Works Department also having to answer some tough questions on the country's quarantine sites. What have we learned?
So, Shahan, you'll recall that the Public Works Department was responsible for identifying state facilities that can be used as quarantine sites. We know already that people who are returning to South Africa, repatriated from abroad, it's mandatory for them to be quarantined for at least 14 days before they are allowed to return home. But we heard quite disturbingly today in this committee meeting, Public Works Department saying, firstly, there are provinces which are not carrying out this mandatory quarantining. People who are crossing land borders are just allowed to return home and are not being quarantined, and they singled out Limpopo as being a chief province that is not adhering to this law, and also to some extent the Free State, and also hearing that some people are just being released. We're not quite sure by whom, are being released from these quarantining facilities without having stayed the full 14 days. The department says it's not their responsibility to make sure that people stay put. That's the responsibility of the Department of Health. But certainly the millions that is being spent by the department, private hotels, for example, they're having to pay for an entire hotel, even though maybe only a few rooms are being used for quarantining purposes. So Patricia de Lille telling the committee that around 200 sites have now been earmarked, and we know MPs are really concerned that not all these sites are suitable for quarantining facilities.
So what are MPs actually saying to that?
So firstly, with regard to the border, they're not convinced that it was a good idea just to continue using the same kind of material and the same format of fencing as was already in place at Beitbridge, and they're wanting to travel there themselves. They say even if lockdown regulations have to be relaxed to allow them to go there, they want to see firsthand what the state of that new fence is, whether it was a good idea to continue with the kind of fencing that was already there, and whether it's been money money well spent. As far as quarantining facilities go, we know there's been outrage about a particular site in Mpumalanga that people say are, who are living there undergoing their quarantining, that it's unhygienic, it's overrun by cockroaches and other infestations, and MPs asking whether it was possible for them to get a list of all the sites that have been earmarked so that they can go in their respective provinces where they conduct oversight, that they could go and check whether in fact these facilities are fit for purpose. But Patricia de Lille saying it wasn't ideal to share the list of these earmarked sites because they wanted to protect the people who are being quarantined at these facilities, but that it was also problematic that repatriation flights were landing at short notice and not giving the department enough time to prepare. For example, they say a flight returned from Ethiopia today, and it was almost when the plane had landed that they found out that they needed to provide quarantining facilities. So overall, MPs expressing a lot of concerns both about the border and about the state of these quarantine facilities.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Lindsay Detlinger is in Cape Town.